Thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. We've got an extraordinarily rich and diverse panel representing different regions, different levels of government, different backgrounds, different expertise. And we're going to start with a two-part question. The first part of the question is, how much of what we're trying to do in cities, all that we're talking about here, can be done just at the city level without support from regional and national government? And to the extent that we need regional and national government to come to the aid and to collaborate with cities on this program, what kind of support is needed? What is working, what's not working, and what's missing? So that whole relationship, and if you really feel you want to go for the bonus points, you might even tell me to what extent national government can't achieve its aims without cities getting this program right. So the relationship runs both ways. And the second part of the question is, to what extent is trust, which is such a dramatically challenging issue for governments everywhere, at every level at the present time, as we see falling levels of trust in government, to what extent can the fact that cities and regions who are closer to their citizens claim to be more trusted and perhaps be able to deliver some of the things that we need on the trust front, even for national government? Is that a good theory or not? And what examples do you see? So that's all of the conversation we're going to have this afternoon. And yeah, that's a big, complicated question, but we're going to start anyway. We've asked speakers to keep it nice and crisp and brief and provocative. They'll each give a brief response to that question, and then we'll throw the conversation open to everybody. So I'd like to start with Laura Borsato, who is Sub-Secretary of Digitization in the government of Argentina. Laura.
You're hearing me? Yes. Yep. Well, good afternoon for everyone. From our perspective in Argentina, what we have done and realizing from the very beginning that the cities are the core society in which the development of economy, of the human resources, on the talents and opportunities are going on. Having that in mind, what we built was a strategy that requires clearly political commitment and a certain framework, regulatory framework or law framework that sets the guidelines for the whole country. And then with this umbrella, build a model, which in Argentina was really something new, a multi-level model in which we in the centralized government interacts with the governors, which adheres to the guidelines that was set by the central government, and then with the mayors, which are really the ones that we directly interact. So all this system in the political arena is being complemented by the other actors, the society, the academic actors. So it's a collaborative system in which we empathizes with the situation of each one of the 2,500 municipalities and cities in Argentina with total different realities. So without understanding that this model is collaborative and requires the efforts of every part, it cannot be possible.
Laura, thank you very much. A fantastic kick-off to the conversation. I'm going to pass over now to Alice Charles, who is Director of Cities, Digital and Infrastructure at the World Economic Forum. Alice.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me here today. I suppose, first of all, we have to understand that if we think about global agreements, for example, the SDGs, and of course we have one that relates to cities, but if you think right across the SDGs, so many of them relate to cities. In fact, the OECD says that about 69% of the targets within the SDGs can only be implemented in cities. However, that agreement is reached at the national government level. It's not reached at the city government level. So in terms of agreeing the targets, national government has a key role. but they will not be able to implement any of those targets if they don't work with city government. So you absolutely need to have this relationship that is two-way between national government and city government. Having said that, we recently seen when the US government decided to pull out of the Paris Agreement, that US cities said, we are still in, we're still going to act, we're still going to commit to implementing the Paris Agreement. So you are seeing cities in certain parts of the world, and I think North America is very unique in that context because of the power that mayors have, that they're able to stand up and decide to go on a journey alone. But in many parts of the world, the national government still has the supreme power, and that path would not be possible.
Alice, thank you very much. I'd like to move now to Grace Quintana Ortega, who is Deputy Director in the government of Colombia. Grace.
Okay. Hola, bueno, varias cosas. En primer lugar, sí manejamos diferente lo que tiene que ver con municipalidad y pues con el tema nacional. Lo que estamos iniciando ahorita es justamente haciendo iniciativas para lograr que lo que quieren hacer desde los municipios se pueda lograr con apalancamiento desde el gobierno nacional.
Okay, so Grace says in Colombia they work obviously together with the local and the national level, and one of the things that they're specifically doing right now is working with the local municipalities to see how the national government can help them to achieve those objectives.
Adicional a esto, pues en Colombia y sé que en muchos países de Latinoamérica también nos falta generar muchas capacidades en los funcionarios de gobierno.
So at the local level, they also have, across government, there's a skills gap for the public workers and the people in the government agencies.
Y esto no solo se ve a nivel, digamos, local, sino también nacional, por lo cual estamos generando un mapa de capacidades para lograr que esos funcionarios puedan pues tener los conocimientos y las competencias necesarias para poder apalancar todo lo que tiene que ver con ciudades inteligentes.
Right, so this is happening both at the local and at the national level, and so one thing they're doing is a skills gap map at both levels so that they can work on a roadmap for skills training for all of those public functionaries.
Desde el Ministerio de Tecnología estamos implementando el modelo de ciudades y territorios inteligentes, a través del cual lo que queremos es un modelo escalonado por el cual se vayan justamente reconociendo, identificando qué capacidades faltan en los gobiernos locales para que puedan empezar a propiciar eso que les falta, lo que necesitan. Y tal cual como decía Laura, es un apoyo justamente colaborativo entre gobierno nacional, gobierno local, los actores principales que somos los ciudadanos y desde luego también la academia y la industria.
Right, so from the national government level, working to focus on which are the skills that they need, how do they develop those, and that not only includes the people who are in public service, but also working with the academy or with universities, the academic sector, and with the private sector, so that they all work together and push these skills development forward for the good of Colombia.
Thank you very much, Grace. Now, he's not featured on your programs or on the screen, but we have a special additional guest here joining us this afternoon. I'm very pleased to pass now to Matt Szabo, who's Deputy Chief of Staff for the City of Los Angeles. Matt.
Thank you very much. So I think the answer to your question, it depends on what perspective. There are certain things that require leadership from the national government from the beginning. But if we're talking about the frontier of innovation and how to best use emerging technologies, that the relationship between cities and the national government, cities should be the centers of innovation, and they should be allowed to do so. The federal government should take a hands-off approach, in our view, and let cities innovate, and then invest in those ideas and programs that are successful. So, like in Los Angeles, we have and sometimes there's challenges with that, right? So there's no and I'm not arguing that there should be, but there's no national policy, for example, for home sharing, for Airbnb. And so that's been left to the cities to negotiate. And in Los Angeles, it's a very large city, but it's a very large city within a very large county of 88 other large cities. So you have different policies in Santa Monica, for example, in Los Angeles and in Long Beach. And so those are some of the challenges, but we'd rather deal with that at the local level. As it relates to issues that the government should be national issues like infrastructure, we still have, the government should look to the cities and invest in what cities are investing in to enhance that investment. And so instead of having disparate programs all over the place, we could also look to cities, for example, also in Los Angeles, we have Hyperloop, or near Los Angeles. And that could be seen potentially as a revolution in public transportation. And so to give cities the leeway to explore these new technologies and then invest on the back end, I think is the best kind of relationship we can establish.
Thanks very much, Matt. There's about 10 questions I want to ask you about that, but I'm going to leave them for now and pass to my good friend Nick Villa, who I think has been to virtually every Barcelona Cities event, more or less, since it began when we were both working together at Cisco, and there were only 1,000 delegates here in 2011, I believe. Maybe 800. Nick runs MasterCard's Center of Excellence in Government as well as public sector across Europe. Nick, what's your perspective?
Yes, so I've been here exactly since 2011. I think I used to have still some hair when I was here first, not anymore. And we were having a discussion before with some of you. We started 10 years ago with a conversation which was about public-private partnerships. And we tended to look at cities as objects and technology as technology, right? And over the last 9 years, we shifted the conversation into starting to think about citizens. I would say not even citizen, people. So how do people lead the city? What are the tangible issues that they're trying to solve, right? And how can we help them through technology, through partnership in the ecosystem that we're usually able to mobilize. Our entry point, of course, into the city discussion has been for many years transit, right? So today we work in more than 200 cities, actually, on open loop transit payment systems, right? Basically, if you are, I don't know if there's anybody from London here, if you're in London today, you tap into the transit system with your card or mobile phone, you tap out. We calculate the fare together with TfL. You basically get charged. And TfL has been able to save, they claim, about £100 million a year in operating costs by basically replacing an own infrastructure with something which is on the market and making it much more efficient. Now the question to us comes when we think about how do we move from one city into a country to every city. In other words, can we start working with the government at this point at the central level, the federal level, to think about a nationwide system that enables open loop payments versus a citywide? And that's where we usually start to get stuck, right? So we struggle in triangulating a strong relationship with the cities, with the central government. And I will argue we have been able to scale more the conversation within cities through Construct the City Possible, that basically being part of the conversation between the city and the federal government. And that's to me an area in which we intend to focus more. That's basically part of my job in terms of being able to scale some of the ideas, solution, innovations that usually come from the cities at the nation and international level.
Well, thank you very much. Before I pass over to the audience and get ready with your killer questions, I'm particularly going to encourage, you'll notice all of them completely ignored my invitation to talk about trust. So if anybody wants to press them on that, feel free to do so. But in the meantime, let me pose to the panel, whoever wants to take it, a different question. I think it's generally accepted that cities are more innovative in this area. They're able to be more innovative partly because they're smaller, maybe because they're closer to their citizens, but they're more agile, and so they're running out ahead. And Matt proposed this vision of really as if cities were like innovation incubators, that a national government could look at what's happening in different cities and say, this is beautiful, this works, let's encourage others to replicate it. Is that a model that actually happens anywhere? Is it a good idea? Do we know of governments? Do your governments do this? Or is that just a beautiful theory?
No, yes, and I think going back to your trust point,
Right.
I was certainly think that You build the trust when you empower the local governments to their own solutions. So when you have a centralized solutions that you can share with the cities, and they feel that the capabilities will not remain in the cities, and also they cannot be improving or giving new solutions to problems that we can replicate in the rest of the country. The relationship is not a bi-directional relationship. So you build the trust when you offer solutions. We learn in the process with each of the cities, and we replicate some solutions that are better than the ones that you want to run, to deploy in a different country. And these ecosystems, I think, is the one relating on the two questions you make, the one that really builds a win-win for everyone.
Right. I mean, Alice mentioned that often cities move faster for other reasons as well. And one of those could be politics. I mean, is there a tension around the politics at the local level being completely different from the
Yes.
politics at the national level? And how do you navigate that?
There's huge tension.
Hang on. Try now.
There's huge tension.
Yep.
I think there's huge tension where the national government is of a different political persuasion to the local government.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is particularly the case in terms of getting access to finance to actually deliver infrastructure and services, because generally for finances for major infrastructure projects, that comes from national government. And if you're of a different political persuasion, then you will see a government try to stop that at the local level. And I think in its worst instances that we've came across, you see that actually they want to take out the leadership of that city because they're being too progressive. But I just wanted to go back to an example that's actually working very well. I wanted to check if there's anyone here from Canada, first of all. Anyone from Canada?
One.
Yes. Okay, so stand up and take a bow. Because Canada's actually doing this. Excellent. It's doing this very, very well in terms
Right.
of getting the relationship between national government, regional government, and city government, particularly in relation to smart cities. And I think what happened, Justin Trudeau's administration came in, and one of the initial things they realized is we're responsible for finance, right? We're responsible for putting money towards major infrastructure projects. So what they did was they doubled infrastructure spend. But the second thing that they did was they launched their Smart Cities Challenge, working with national government, regional government, and city government. And I think what was unique about that was that they dealt with trust front and center. So essentially, they encouraged cities, towns, villages to work on creating their vision for what was a smart city. And when they were thinking about a smart city, they didn't purely think about it in the context of IoT as an enabler. They thought about it in a wider context in terms of greening your infrastructure, upgrading your infrastructure and services in your city. And they got real visions from cities in terms of what they wanted to do. And of course there was prizes for winning cities of different sizes, but I think if you didn't win the prize, the journey didn't stop there. Because the third thing they did was they set up an infrastructure bank. So you had that possibility as a city to be able to implement this vision that you've created for your city, but you can get finance either from national government for the very risky projects, purely getting national government financing, or getting financing from the infrastructure bank. And thinking, I guess they've also thought very differently in that context about public-private partnerships, which citizens do not trust. So, in terms of, they've reframed public-private partnerships and put the public, so they've added a fourth P in there and put the public front and center. So I think that's a very good example of where you have national, regional, and city government working together, but they're bringing the vision up from the grassroots, which is from the citizen.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned the Canadian example, actually, because I found it quite inspiring. And of course, they put real money into this, which helps cities that are, cash strapped to really up their vision a little bit and be a bit ambitious and experimental.
Can I add actually something on the funding side? Is there anybody from the Netherlands here, from Holland? Okay, as a Dutch person, you should know. So, 20 years ago, you and I started to work with the National Economic Development Ministry, who was starting to stimulate the deployment of next generation broadband infrastructure, also known as fiber to the home into the Netherlands, right? And while my home country, Italy, was trying to create a national fund for broadband and so on, and systematically, unfortunately, failed, the Dutch, I think, did something very smart. They created a prize for cities to be able to create a sustainable business model and buy fiber to the home, right? And so they awarded a prize which was 1 million euros at the time, and Eindhoven won the prize. But guess what? There are 20 cities who developed the business model, decided to proceed anyway. They went into the market and they started to work with pension funds, with local cooperatives, and created fiber to the home programs. Amsterdam, Utrecht, and so on popped up. At a certain point, the market reacted. So the large telecom companies started to say, wait a second, this is an interesting opportunity for us. So they started to partner with the local municipalities. Sometimes they took over and bought the infrastructure that the municipality basically spent. And today, the Netherlands is a fully fiber to the home enabled program. And I was talking once with a former Minister of the Economy, Annemarie Orisma, who was one of the people that started that. She's now the mayor of a city over there. And she told me our idea was to start to stimulate the market, to disrupt a bit without having to invest ourselves, and then we wanted to see if the market reacted. In the case it did, right? So to me, it's access to availability of funds, but also the idea of the role of the national government in stimulating local opportunities, and then basically re-engaging the business side to drive the scale.
So we've got Netherlands and Canada winning the beauty competition so far. Now I'm throwing it open to the audience. Would anybody like to throw another country into the mix? Or throw a question to the panel? Yes. You. We might need to borrow your handheld microphone for a second. Forgive my slow movement. I thought downstairs.
Thank you very much.
You give that to-
After 2 days of affair, my voice is quite dismissed. So I have a question because I'm a representative of an association of transport operators in Europe, and we are facing this issue of global versus local. What I mean is that we are very good to operate buses, trains from a region to change the law and everything, so this is good. But for digital aspects, we are very bad. Making a good application for transportation, passenger information, payments is very difficult. I mean, it's very heavy. And my question is that from your side, with your experience from the other part of the Atlantic, how do you deal with these private-public issues of having digital champions with very global approach? Because Uber, Google Maps, Citymapper, Moveit, Airbnb are very good because they are global, but they put apart some people of my city, of my network, and my region. And so, with your point of view and with your experience, where are we now? Is it like, okay, we accept this global digital champion and we say, okay, they're here, we have to face with them and just live in parallel? Or is it more constant discussion like, okay, you are global, but please, I have this specificity in my city, in my nation, so how we can deal together? Or it's more like, okay, we take the global and it's going to be this way. So I'm asking, maybe it could be from your experience, what's your point of view on that? Thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I think going back to the local to national, I think this is particularly in public transportation, this is a place where, and so very often, technology is far out ahead of policy and regulation, as it should be. So if you look at the scooters that have exploded all over the world and certainly all over Los Angeles, we want to let that technology test itself out, and the place to do that is cities before you come up with a national policy, because those at the city level are going to be most responsive and receptive to the feedback that they will be getting from the local constituents. So let the cities work it out, have a long leash, and then let the cities come up with the regulation, or investment in some cases, and then bring it national. Because what you don't want to have is folks at the national or global level making policies, not understanding what the impacts are at the ground level.
Yeah, Grace.
Quiero complementar algo, y es que definitivamente sí es mucho más innovadora la ciudad que el país, pero para aplicaciones, digamos, como lo hace Google, definitivamente necesita de la data, de la información local. ¿Y qué pasa con eso? Yo creo que hay dos puntos importantes que tenemos que tocar. El primero es la caracterización de usuarios.
Okay, so definitely she agrees that the city is typically more innovative than the country, especially if we think about Google and the kind of data they need from the local level.
Y justamente el tema de política pública, que sí siempre es más rezagada que lo que avanza en la tecnología.
Right, and public policy, of course, yes, follows the technology advances, like you were saying, from Los Angeles.
Pero esto se trata de convivencia, porque tenemos que ir mucho más allá de transformación digital, tenemos que ir hacia una cultura digital. Entonces, siempre que sensibilicemos a nivel local, vamos a poder lograr esa convivencia entre lo que tenemos de solución global o nacional para poderlo utilizar en la parte local y viceversa, utilizar la información local para que se pueda, digamos, tomar mejores decisiones, por ejemplo, de gobierno.
Okay, but it all comes down to being able to live together and work together, whether it's at the local or national level. All these things have to function. Using that local data within even the national framework, and then it has to work together like that.
Well, we've got time for one more question if somebody up there has got a burning issue they'd like to raise.
Hi, Dominic Pop. I'm the Vice President for the Smart State Initiative for the state of Arizona. So maybe just, the role of universities and how can they play in this space. So just maybe a brag about the model we just launched. We just launched our Greater Phoenix Smart Region Initiative, which is taking the 22 communities in the Greater Phoenix region, getting them to think together, act together, innovate together, and procure technology infrastructure together. We also partnered with ASU, the world's largest public research institution, to provide that fundamental research pillar to inform best practices for the cities as they go about this development into a smart region. So can you just speak a little bit about the role the universities can really play, not only testing on their campuses to become those living labs before they go to the cities, but also how can universities really play that intellectual role as well, helping us push this forward?
Do we have one?
So I think earlier we had a question about replication. I'm going to answer that and then I'm going to come to your point. So the first thing to remember, in cities around the world, a lot of the problems are similar, but their context is absolutely unique. So the solutions that you employ in any city need to be uniquely tailored to that particular city. And in that context, that's where universities really come into the mix. So in terms of thinking about any solutions that you've got to deliver across the urban value chain, you do need public-private collaboration. And that means you need to work with all levels of government, the multi-stakeholder of government, but you've also got to work with business, academia, civil society. And I think bringing in your local university who understand the unique DNA of that city, the unique challenges of that city, is so important in terms of trying to, first of all, come up with solutions, experiment, iterate, and scale solutions on the ground.
Yeah, I did a collaboration myself a number of years ago between NASA, 3 Latin American governments, and ASU. And ASU were incredible, but I have to say it's sometimes really hard collaborating with universities. And it's partly about language and incentives. You've got universities talking this language, cities and national governments talking this language, and us weirdos in the tech sector talking a completely different language. And it's really hard to get everybody on the same page. Anyway, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us. For those of you who want to go into a deep dive, we're going to spend a little more time talking about this subject right now over in the Tech Hub, which is the pod just sitting behind here. If you want to sit down around a table, grab a coffee and get more deeply into this subject, because obviously we've only scratched the surface and it's going to take 2 or 3 more days to get to the bottom of it. But meanwhile, thank you very much. And thank you to the panel.